Have you ever faced a personal setback or experienced something deeply painful, only to hear someone say, "Just get over it"? It's a phrase many of us have encountered in our lives. Whether it's after a breakup, the loss of a loved one, a job loss, or even a traumatic experience, in these moments, instead of receiving empathy or understanding, we're met with the dismissive suggestion to simply move on. Get over it sounds easy enough, but here's the problem. It doesn't work. This kind of advice may come from a place of wanting to help, but it often does more harm than good. It implies that there's something wrong with feeling pain or struggling to heal, and it promotes the idea that emotional distress is something that can just be fixed, quickly, or ignored. The issue with telling someone to get over it is that it invalidates their emotional experience. Healing isn't a switch you can flip. It's not a process of ignoring or suppressing the emotions that arise from difficult life experiences. Yet society pressures us to rush through pain, to act as if we're fine, to move forward as if nothing happened. This societal norm pushes us to avoid what makes us human, our vulnerability. The more we're told to just get over it, the more we suppress our emotions, burying them beneath the surface without giving ourselves the chance to truly process and heal. The longer we push our feelings aside, the more likely it is that they'll manifest in unhealthy ways: anxiety, depression, or even physical illness. So, if getting over it doesn't actually help us heal, then what does? To answer that, we need to understand what trauma really is, and how it shapes both our minds and bodies. Trauma is often misunderstood. It's not just something that happens during a major event like war or abuse. Trauma can occur after any overwhelming experience that leaves us feeling helpless, fearful, or unsafe. Psychologically, trauma is any experience that deeply affects our emotional, mental, and physical state. This includes not only the obvious events like a serious accident or the loss of a loved one, but also ongoing stressors like bullying, relationship breakdowns, or childhood neglect. The effects of trauma can persist for years if left unaddressed, often leading to emotional and psychological distress. From a psychological perspective, trauma is a disruption to our sense of safety, identity, and emotional equilibrium. The body and mind experience trauma differently, but both are affected in profound ways. When something traumatic occurs, the brain's natural response is to focus on survival, often pushing the emotional processing of the event aside. This is where the amygdala, the brain's emotional center, comes into play. The amygdala reacts quickly to danger, triggering the body's fight or flight response. While this is a protective measure in the moment, it can become a problem when the trauma is not fully processed and the amygdala remains overactive. This leads to hypervigilance, anxiety, and persistent emotional stress. On the other hand, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making and emotional regulation, is often impaired in the aftermath of trauma. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, a leading trauma researcher, explains that when trauma is not processed, the prefrontal cortex becomes less effective at controlling the intense emotions triggered by the amygdala. This results in heightened emotional responses and difficulty processing thoughts and feelings, making it harder for the person to heal. Dr. van der Kolk notes that trauma actually rewires the brain in ways that can affect a person's ability to regulate their emotions, make rational decisions, and maintain a sense of inner peace. Understanding this, it becomes clear why simply telling someone to get over it is harmful. When we rush emotional healing or push ourselves to move past the pain too quickly, we prevent the brain from fully processing the traumatic experience. Emotions, particularly those tied to trauma, need space to be expressed, understood, and integrated. Ignoring or bypassing emotional pain doesn't lead to healing. It only suppresses the emotions, making them harder to deal with later. It's like placing a lid on a pot that's boiling over. Eventually it will explode. Allowing emotions to process means experiencing them fully. This doesn't mean wallowing in sadness or anger indefinitely, but it involves sitting with those emotions long enough to understand them and release them. Neuroscience shows that emotional pain, when ignored, becomes trapped in the body. This can lead to physical symptoms like tension, chronic pain, or even immune system problems. When we fail to process our emotions, our bodies begin to hold on to them in unhealthy ways, reinforcing the trauma and making it more difficult to overcome in the future. This is why emotional pain isn't something we should try to just get over. Emotions need space to be experienced and expressed, not suppressed. By allowing ourselves to feel and process the pain, we build resilience and start the healing process. True healing is gradual, patient, and rooted in self-compassion. Now that we understand how trauma affects the brain and body, it's important to explore the damaging consequences of suppressing emotions, which many people turn to in an attempt to move on too quickly. Emotional suppression, often seen as an effort to protect ourselves from painful feelings, actually has a profound and detrimental impact on our mental and physical health. When we push down emotions like sadness, anger, or grief, we don't eliminate them, we store them within, where they continue to influence us, often without our conscious awareness. Suppressing emotions can lead to a buildup of emotional tension. Psychological research has consistently shown that this emotional bottling increases stress levels, which in turn leads to a heightened risk of anxiety, depression, and other mental health conditions. In fact, chronic emotional suppression is linked to more significant psychological disorders. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that people who suppress their emotions experience higher levels of anxiety, stress, and depression, often because their emotions become unprocessed and unresolved. What happens when we keep pushing our emotions away is that we inadvertently create a cycle of emotional stagnation. We become disconnected from our true feelings and our ability to process them, which leads to an accumulation of emotional pain. This suppressed pain doesn't disappear. It simply remains dormant, waiting to resurface at some point, often triggered by the smallest event. Eventually, this stagnation can overwhelm the system, leading to an emotional breakdown or burnout. The physical effects of emotional suppression are equally serious. When emotions like grief or anger are kept inside, they can manifest as physical ailments. Chronic stress resulting from emotional suppression can lead to high blood pressure, heart disease, and even immune system dysfunction. Dr. Susan David, a psychologist and expert on emotional agility, has extensively researched the impact of emotional suppression. She argues that emotions are not a problem to be solved. They are signals to be understood. According to Dr. David, suppressing our emotions doesn't help us move on faster. It locks us in emotional stagnation, which prevents us from growing and moving forward in a healthy way. Dr. David's work on emotional agility emphasizes the importance of being flexible with our emotions and approaching them with acceptance rather than avoidance. She argues that emotional agility is about having the mental flexibility to face difficult emotions without letting them control our lives. Rather than pushing them aside, we need to acknowledge them, understand their messages, and allow them the space to dissipate. Suppressing emotions does the opposite. It keeps us stuck in a loop where our feelings govern us, rather than us having the agency to work through them constructively. Emotional suppression, in essence, creates more harm than good. It prevents us from processing the pain that needs to be faced and leads to an endless cycle of avoidance and denial. Only by facing our emotions directly can we move toward healing, growth, and true emotional resilience. Having explored the harm caused by suppressing emotions, let's now turn our attention to the societal pressures that encourage us to move on too quickly, and how this can actually hinder healing. In many cultures, particularly in the American context, there is a pervasive expectation that people should demonstrate resilience almost immediately after experiencing a setback or trauma. This belief is rooted in the idea that showing emotion or vulnerability is a weakness, and that true strength lies in quickly moving past pain, regardless of its intensity. We're often told that we should get back to work, go out with friends, or resume our daily activities as if nothing happened. The idea of moving on quickly is so deeply ingrained in modern society that it has become a measure of emotional success. However, this expectation can be extremely problematic. It creates an environment where people feel pressured to suppress their grief, fear, or sadness before they've had the time to properly process these emotions. The result is that we are forced to bypass the important steps in healing, which are understanding, confronting, and embracing our emotions. When this process is skipped, we risk emotional repression and long-term psychological harm. The pervasive message that we must quickly move on is not only unrealistic but also damaging. The idea that resilience means bouncing back quickly from any adversity disregards the individual nature of healing. Some traumas may take months or even years to fully process, yet society's quick-fix mentality pressures individuals to compress their healing into an unreasonably short time frame. When we are told to move on too fast, we deny ourselves the necessary time for reflection, adjustment, and ultimately recovery. The rush to get over it doesn't allow for emotional growth, but instead encourages individuals to push aside their pain in favor of appearance and social expectation. In today's digital age, social media only amplifies this pressure to appear as if we are constantly moving on and living our best lives. Social media platforms encourage a curated version of reality, one that focuses on happiness, success, and achievement. People share their highlight reels, vacation photos, family celebrations, career wins, while hiding the raw, messy, and vulnerable parts of their lives. This creates a distorted view of reality, leading people to believe that they should be over their struggles, just as everyone else seems to be. The reality is that everyone has their emotional battles, but social media encourages us to hide them, contributing to a culture of emotional suppression. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow is particularly relevant here. Jung described the shadow as the parts of ourselves that we suppress, deny, or refuse to acknowledge because they are seen as undesirable or uncomfortable. These emotions, whether grief, anger, or fear, don't simply disappear because we choose not to deal with them. Instead, they remain in the unconscious, shaping our behavior, relationships, and decision-making, often in subtle or hidden ways. The shadow is not something we can simply get over. It is a part of us that, until we confront and integrate it, continues to influence our lives. When we force ourselves to move on quickly, we're essentially avoiding our shadow, pushing down the very emotions that need to be processed. Over time, the unaddressed pain and emotions from our shadow can manifest in unhealthy ways, like anxiety, depression, or even physical illness. To truly heal, we must stop pretending that we can just get over it. We need to give ourselves the space to confront our shadow, accept the emotions we've been avoiding, and allow ourselves to heal at our own pace rather than society's. Having explored the societal pressure to move on quickly, it's important to now focus on what true healing entails, particularly why emotional processing is crucial to recovery. Healing isn't about quickly getting over it. It's about acknowledging and accepting our emotions, rather than rushing past them. It involves sitting with our feelings, facing the discomfort, and giving ourselves the time and space to fully understand the pain we've experienced. When faced with a traumatic event, the natural instinct is often to move on or push through the pain, but as we've already explored, rushing emotional healing only leads to suppression. To heal in a healthy way, we must allow ourselves to experience and understand the grief, anger, or sadness we're feeling. This emotional processing is essential. Only by fully confronting our emotions can we gain clarity and insight, rather than remaining stuck in turmoil. An important concept in the healing process is post-traumatic growth. PTG is the idea that, while trauma is painful and difficult, it also offers an opportunity for personal growth and resilience. People who go through trauma can emerge from the experience stronger, wiser, and with a deeper understanding of themselves. But this doesn't happen by rushing the healing process or pretending that everything is fine. PTG occurs when individuals consciously process their emotions and confront the pain. Through this confrontation, they can find meaning in their experience, shift their perspectives, and develop resilience that helps them navigate future challenges. Dr. Richard Tedeschi, one of the leading researchers on post-traumatic growth, explains that post-traumatic growth is not just about bouncing back. It's about moving forward in a way that reflects a deeper understanding of life. In his research, Dr. Tedeschi found that people who process their trauma with the intention to learn from it, who allow themselves to experience the full emotional depth of their pain, are more likely to experience profound personal growth. This emotional engagement doesn't mean avoiding or numbing pain, but rather embracing it, understanding it, and using it as a foundation for rebuilding and growth. Dr. Tedeschi's work suggests that those who confront their emotional struggles, rather than suppress them, are more likely to experience greater self-awareness, empathy, and a stronger sense of purpose. The key to this growth is acceptance, accepting that the pain is part of the journey, and that through this process, we can emerge more connected to ourselves and others. Ultimately, the importance of emotional processing lies in its ability to turn painful experiences into opportunities for growth. When we allow ourselves the grace to feel our emotions fully, we open the door to healing that goes beyond mere survival. We transform ourselves through the process of facing our pain. This is the power of post-traumatic growth and why healing cannot be rushed. Building on the idea that healing requires processing emotions, it's time to explore a critical aspect of emotional recovery: vulnerability, and how embracing it can unlock our capacity to heal and grow. Vulnerability is often seen as a weakness in many cultures, where showing emotion or asking for help can be perceived as failing to cope. However, true healing demands that we embrace vulnerability, not as a flaw, but as a powerful source of emotional strength. It takes courage to face our deepest fears, our rawest emotions, and to allow ourselves to be fully present with what we're feeling without trying to hide or suppress it. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we open up the possibility for deep emotional connection with ourselves and others. Brené Brown, a researcher on vulnerability, defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. But she also emphasizes that it is the birthplace of courage, creativity, and joy. Vulnerability is not about weakness. Rather, it's the strength to show up authentically and embrace our imperfections. Brown's research reveals that when people embrace vulnerability, they are more likely to experience authentic connections, self-compassion, and emotional resilience. They don't just survive their struggles, they grow and learn through them, becoming more emotionally flexible and capable of handling life's challenges with grace. It may seem counterintuitive, but the ability to face vulnerability head-on accelerates the healing process. Dr. Brown's work shows that people who allow themselves to be vulnerable are more resilient and better equipped to manage emotional pain. Rather than avoiding or pushing aside difficult emotions, they face them directly, which allows for growth and healing. This kind of emotional openness fosters self-acceptance, a crucial part of healing. To accept ourselves, we must allow ourselves to experience vulnerability without judgment or shame. Only by embracing our true selves, including the parts we find uncomfortable, can we truly heal and move forward. If you're wondering how to begin incorporating vulnerability into your life, here are some practical steps. One effective method is journaling. Journaling gives you a private space to express emotions that may be hard to say out loud. Whether it's grief, anger, or joy, writing about your experiences helps to clarify your thoughts and allows you to reflect on what you're going through. Another powerful tool is talking with trusted people. Sharing your feelings with a close friend, family member, or therapist can make a significant difference in your emotional healing process. It can help you feel seen and understood, and often, just being heard can release the weight of what you're carrying. Finally, it's important to accept sadness as a natural part of life. Instead of pushing away sadness or pretending to be okay, allow yourself to feel it fully. Self-compassion is key in this process. Treat yourself with the same kindness you would offer to a friend who is struggling. By allowing vulnerability in small, intentional ways, we lay the foundation for emotional growth. It's not about being open with everyone. It's about being honest with yourself and meeting your emotions with compassion instead of judgment. After exploring the power of vulnerability, it's important to recognize that healing takes time, and trying to rush it only deepens the pain. In today's fast-paced world, we're often pressured to return to normal quickly after trauma or loss. But emotional recovery doesn't follow a straight line. There are highs and lows, clarity and confusion, and that's okay. Just like physical wounds need time and care, emotional wounds require patience and space. When we rush to move on, we risk missing the deeper insight and strength that only time can bring. The philosopher Epictetus, a Stoic thinker, reminds us that we must accept what is beyond our control. He famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Healing is a natural process, but it's one that takes time and patience. Epictetus teaches that we should not rush through the emotional pain or expect it to resolve itself immediately. Instead, we must accept the reality that healing requires space to unfold at its own pace. Trying to control the process by speeding it up only leads to frustration and prolonged suffering. Psychologically, the stages of grief, as outlined by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, provide a framework for understanding the natural progression of emotional recovery. These stages, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, are not meant to be rushed through. They are a normal part of the grieving process, and each stage serves a purpose in helping us cope and eventually come to terms with the trauma. Kubler-Ross's research shows that everyone experiences grief in their own way and at their own pace. Rushing through any of these stages can lead to unresolved emotions that may surface later in life, sometimes in more destructive ways. For example, denial might serve as a protective mechanism in the immediate aftermath of a loss, giving us time to adjust before fully facing the reality of the situation. If we rush past denial or fail to fully experience the anger or sadness that follows, we may never fully process these emotions. Acceptance, the final stage, comes only after we've allowed ourselves to feel and understand the previous stages. Without time and emotional space to experience each stage fully, we cannot achieve true acceptance, which is the cornerstone of emotional healing and growth. So just like physical wounds, emotional pain needs care and time to heal. Rushing the process only deepens the hurt, but with patience and presence, true healing becomes possible. Now that we've seen how trauma impacts the brain and body, it's important to understand how rushing through the healing process can disrupt the brain's natural recovery mechanisms, leading to harmful, long-term effects. As we discussed earlier, the amygdala becomes heightened in response to trauma, and the prefrontal cortex struggles to regulate emotions in the aftermath. The natural emotional recovery process requires time for the brain to rewire, but rushing the healing, or pushing ourselves to just get over it, interrupts this necessary process. Chronic anxiety is one of the most significant consequences of rushing emotional healing. When we fail to process the emotional pain, our bodies remain in a state of stress. As mentioned before, emotional suppression keeps the brain in a constant fight or flight response. This prolonged stress can lead to increased anxiety because the brain hasn't had the time to properly recalibrate and integrate the trauma. Instead of resetting and moving towards emotional balance, the trauma continues to impact us at a deeper, more unconscious level. The result is a cycle of anxiety and tension that never fully resolves. By skipping the emotional processing, we also risk unresolved trauma. As we briefly touched on earlier, when emotions like grief, anger, or fear are not fully felt and expressed, they don't just go away. Instead, they stay locked inside, impacting our thoughts, behaviors, and relationships. We don't heal by bypassing the emotional pain. We carry it with us, and eventually, it can resurface in unexpected ways, such as in physical symptoms or emotional outbursts. When we don't allow time for proper emotional processing, we're prolonging the impact of that trauma in our lives, often without realizing it. Another consequence of rushing healing is emotional numbness. When we're pressured to move on quickly, we shut off parts of ourselves in order to avoid feeling pain. But this emotional repression doesn't just eliminate the hurt. It disengages us from our ability to experience the full spectrum of emotions. Over time, this numbness makes us feel disconnected not only from the traumatic experience, but from our own selves. We go through the motions of life, but we no longer feel truly present. This numbness can lead to detachment, apathy, and a sense of living on autopilot. We're physically functioning, but emotionally, we've disconnected from the healing process. From a neuroscientific standpoint, rushing the healing process prevents the brain from completing its natural neuroplastic reorganization. As we noted earlier, after trauma, the brain needs time to heal and adapt. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to form new neural connections, and emotional recovery is a critical part of this process. When we don't give ourselves time to process our emotions, this natural reorganization is disrupted. Instead of recalibrating to a new emotional equilibrium, we continue to operate from an unhealed state. This creates an emotional feedback loop where the trauma remains lodged in our neural pathways, creating further emotional instability in the future. Consider a real-life example of someone who rushed through their healing process after experiencing the death of a close family member. Instead of allowing themselves to fully grieve, they forced themselves to return to work and put on a brave face, thinking they should be fine by now. Months later, they began experiencing sudden bursts of anger, irritability, and extreme emotional exhaustion. What they didn't realize was that by trying to rush through the stages of grief, they had only masked the pain. As a result, unresolved emotions began to manifest in their daily life in unhealthy ways, impacting their relationships and work performance. This individual had essentially pushed their emotional healing aside, only to face the consequences of suppressed grief later on. While rushing through the healing process can lead to harmful consequences, there are healthier, more effective ways to cope with setbacks and emotional pain that allow for deeper recovery and growth. Mindfulness is one of the most powerful tools available for processing emotions in a healthy way. Rather than suppressing or avoiding difficult feelings, mindfulness encourages us to be fully present with our emotions, without judgment. It teaches us to observe our thoughts and feelings without getting caught up in them or reacting impulsively. Mindfulness techniques can include practices like deep breathing, body scans, or simple awareness of our thoughts and feelings in the moment. This non-judgmental awareness helps us create a healthy distance from overwhelming emotions, making it easier to process them without becoming consumed by them. Mindfulness also allows us to notice patterns in our emotional responses, giving us insight into why we feel the way we do. This awareness is crucial for understanding the root causes of our emotional pain, rather than just pushing through it. Instead of trying to get over negative emotions quickly, mindfulness helps us become aware of them and process them fully. This not only reduces emotional distress, but also promotes emotional resilience, helping us navigate future challenges more effectively. Alongside mindfulness, self-compassion plays a critical role in emotional recovery. Many people are their own harshest critics, especially during difficult times. We may blame ourselves for feeling hurt, or we might believe that we should be stronger or better at handling our emotions. However, treating ourselves with kindness is essential for emotional healing. Dr. Kristin Neff, a leading expert on self-compassion, emphasizes that self-compassion involves being gentle with ourselves in times of struggle, rather than resorting to self-criticism. Dr. Neff's research shows that people who practice self-compassion are more likely to experience lower levels of anxiety and depression and greater emotional well-being. Self-compassion allows us to accept our imperfections and treat ourselves with the same care and understanding that we would offer a close friend. Instead of feeling ashamed of our emotional pain, we recognize that it is part of the human experience, and we deserve kindness and support in the face of it. In addition to these practices, therapeutic approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and trauma-informed therapy can be incredibly beneficial in learning to process emotions and develop healthier coping mechanisms. CBT helps individuals identify and challenge negative thought patterns that contribute to emotional distress, while ACT encourages acceptance of difficult emotions and commitment to living in accordance with one's values, despite the presence of pain. Trauma-informed therapy focuses on healing trauma by recognizing the impact of past experiences on current emotional health and providing a safe environment for clients to process and heal. These therapeutic methods provide structured frameworks that can guide individuals through emotional pain, offering them the tools to heal and grow in healthy ways. By integrating mindfulness, self-compassion, and therapeutic support into our lives, we begin to heal in deeper, more sustainable ways. These tools not only help us process pain, they build resilience, allowing us to face future setbacks with greater strength and self-understanding. After exploring healthier ways to cope with emotions, it's essential to understand how we can build a healthy relationship with our emotions, using tools like emotional intelligence to foster lasting well-being. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, as well as recognize and influence the emotions of others. Unlike emotional suppression, which we know can lead to negative health consequences, emotional intelligence empowers us to navigate our feelings with clarity and intention. As we discussed earlier, When we suppress emotions, we risk emotional stagnation, leading to increased stress, anxiety, and even physical ailments. Emotional intelligence provides us with the skills to prevent these issues by helping us engage with our emotions in healthy, constructive ways. Emotional intelligence allows us to be more aware of our emotional state, recognize how our emotions influence our thoughts and behaviors, and respond to situations in a balanced way. By developing emotional intelligence, we can not only improve our personal well-being, but also foster healthier relationships with others. For example, mindfulness techniques, which we've touched on, help us to stay present and acknowledge our emotions as they arise, allowing for better self-regulation without the impulse to suppress or ignore them. Building on this, Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia, often translated as flourishing, offers a philosophical perspective on how embracing our emotions contributes to lasting happiness. Aristotle believed that true happiness doesn't come from avoiding pain or seeking pleasure, but rather from living in accordance with virtue and fully engaging with the human experience. Eudaimonia is not about feeling constantly joyful, but about living a balanced life where we acknowledge our emotions and respond to them in a way that promotes our overall well-being. Embracing both the light and dark aspects of our emotional landscape, rather than ignoring or suppressing them, is central to achieving lasting flourishing. To foster emotional intelligence, there are several practical steps we can take. First, mindfulness exercises remain a valuable tool to develop greater emotional awareness. Another powerful tool is setting emotional boundaries. As we discussed previously, boundaries are essential to protect your emotional health. Setting boundaries ensures that you don't overextend yourself or allow others' emotions to overwhelm your own, which helps maintain emotional balance and self-respect. Finally, developing self-awareness through journaling or reflective practices can help you identify patterns in your emotional responses, giving you the tools to navigate future challenges more effectively. By incorporating emotional intelligence into our daily lives, we create a foundation for lasting emotional well-being and resilience. This doesn't mean we'll never feel difficult emotions, but rather we'll have the tools to manage them, allowing us to lead a more fulfilling, balanced life, as Aristotle would say, one that is aligned with our true values and eudaimonia. As we reflect on everything we've discussed, it becomes clear that healing is a process, one that cannot be rushed. The idea of getting over it is a superficial approach that fails to honor the depth of human emotion. True healing requires us to sit with our feelings, to process the pain, and to give ourselves permission to experience each emotion fully, no matter how uncomfortable it might feel in the moment. This journey is unique to each individual, and there is no timeline for it. It's okay to take time. Healing doesn't happen by moving past our emotions. It happens by confronting them and allowing ourselves to grow through the experience. I encourage you to reflect on your own emotional healing. Ask yourself, how can you allow yourself to truly feel your feelings without rushing through them? What might it look like if you gave yourself the space to process and heal at your own pace, without the pressure of moving on? Healing isn't about getting over it. It's about moving through it with compassion, patience, and a willingness to embrace the journey. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below with, "I am giving myself the time to heal." Let's support one another on this path to healing and growth. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on more powerful insights like this.